Ever get that feeling? Like your get up and go, got up and went.
Yeah, I think we all have those days.
Turns out nearly half of men over 45 might be dealing with something that makes those days a lot more frequent.
Hypogonadism.
You got it. And that's what we're diving into today. We're talking about enclomiphene citrate as a potential treatment. We've got FDA meeting notes, clinical studies, the whole 9 yards.
It's definitely a topic that deserves a closer look. And you're right, it's not just about feeling tired, it's about how well your tests are actually functioning.
So we're talking more than just low testosterone here.
Exactly. It's a common misconception that hypogonadism equals low T. But it can also mean problems with sperm production. And that's obviously a big deal for men who are thinking about having biological children.
Okay, so a double whammy potentially.
Yeah.
And that's where enclomiphene comes in.
It's one potential treatment option, and it's interesting because it's actually related to a drug that's been used for female infertility for decades. Clomiphene.
I've definitely heard of that one.
But here's the catch. Clomiphene has 2 forms, and they act very differently in men.
Oh, this is where it gets complicated, I bet.
A little bit, but stick with me. One form, clomiphene, can actually disrupt sperm production, which is not what we want.
Definitely not.
But in clomiphene, the other form is different. It works much faster in the body, and there's some early research that suggests it could have some real advantages.
Okay, so faster acting and potentially, hopefully, better outcomes. That definitely piques my interest. I always want to know more about the how and why. What can you tell me about the really early research on this before we even get to human trials?
Well, there have been some promising studies done on mice and baboons. And remember how I mentioned that clomiphene could mess with sperm production?
Yeah, not good.
Well, in one study, mice who were given clomiphene, they actually saw significant shrinkage and reduced function in their reproductive organs.
Yikes. Not a good look.
Not at all. But with enclomiphene, researchers actually observed kind of the opposite. It actually seemed to improve things. And here's the thing. Not only did it boost testosterone levels in these animal studies, but it also showed some potential for improving cholesterol levels.
Now, wait a minute. So we're talking 2 birds, 1 stone, helping with hypogonadism and potentially reducing the risk of heart problems down the line. That seems like kind of a big deal, especially compared to what I've heard about traditional testosterone therapy and cholesterol.
It's definitely interesting.
I know. Animal studies, not always a perfect predictor of what happens in humans.
You're right. It's way too early to draw any firm conclusions. But the really exciting thing is that the early findings from human trials, they seem to be aligning with what we're seeing in those preclinical studies.
All right, now you've got my attention. What kind of results are we talking about with the human trials?
Well, in one phase 2 study, researchers looked at men who had hypogonadism, and they found that not only did enclomiphene increase their testosterone levels, but it also really significantly boosted their FSH and LH levels.
Okay, time for a quick refresher. Why are those 2 hormones so important?
Right. FSH and LH, they're like the conductors of the orchestra when it comes to sperm production. They're absolutely essential. So the fact that enclomiphene seems to be positively affecting them it's a very encouraging sign, especially for men who are concerned about fertility.
This is fascinating stuff. I love digging into this research. But we do have to talk about the elephant in the room, safety. With any medication, especially anything that messes with hormones, there's always potential risks. What's the deal with enclomiphene? What do we need to know?
You are absolutely right. Safety should always be top of mind. And just like any type of testosterone therapy, there are some potential risks associated with enclomiphene.
Okay, so let's talk about those risks. What are we talking about specifically?
Well, one of the primary concerns with any testosterone therapy, enclomiphene included, is the risk of what are called thromboembolic events.
Thromboembolic events?
Basically, we're talking about blood clots.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's definitely not something to mess around with.
Yeah.
So for someone who might be considering enclomiphene, how do they balance that risk with the potential benefits?
Well, I think the important thing to keep in mind here is that particular risk, it's not unique to enclomiphene. It's a known risk with all forms of testosterone therapy, even those patches and the gels that people are often prescribed. The key takeaway here really is that both patients and their doctors, they need to be aware of that risk and, be on the lookout for any signs of trouble.
So informed decision-making is key, as always. But focusing specifically on enclomiphene, did the research say anything about, I don't know, like its track record so far when it comes to safety?
Yeah, so there was a large analysis done of a bunch of enclomiphene trials, and it actually found that while they did see increases in hemoglobin and hematocrit, which can be, related to blood clotting, those changes weren't considered clinically significant with enclomiphene.
Oh, interesting.
And that's in contrast to, say, testosterone gel, where those changes were more pronounced.
Okay, so potentially, maybe, a slightly better safety profile compared to those other forms of testosterone therapy.
Possibly.
That's huge if it's true. Okay, anything else we need to know about side effects before we move on?
Well, remember how we were talking earlier about enclomiphene maybe actually being good for cholesterol?
Yeah.
Some studies are suggesting that it could have a positive impact on those levels, which is pretty remarkable considering like some other testosterone therapies can actually do the opposite.
Wow, so we're talking potential benefits for testosterone and cholesterol. This is like really making me rethink everything I thought I knew about hormone therapy. But I mean, it kind of begs the question, why would someone pick enclomiphene over, more traditional testosterone therapy? What's the advantage there?
I think you've hit on a really crucial point that's often overlooked in these discussions, and it's a big one. Fertility.
Okay.
So traditional testosterone replacement therapy, TRT, it can be really effective for boosting testosterone levels,
Right.
but it can also suppress sperm production.
Oh.
And in some cases, it can even lead to testicular atrophy, which is obviously, not a good thing.
Yeah, that's not ideal. Wow, I had no idea the impact on fertility could be so significant. I mean, that really changes things, doesn't it? So enclomiphene doesn't have those same risks.
That seems to be the case, yeah. Not only does it not seem to carry those same risks, but it actually might improve sperm parameters. Yeah, we're potentially talking about like a total paradigm shift here, especially for younger guys who are diagnosed with hypogonadism, maybe who haven't started families yet. Imagine being able to address those low T symptoms without having to like sacrifice your chances of having kids.
That's a game changer.
Yeah.
But how do doctors even like measure the impact of enclomiphene on fertility? Like, what are they looking at?
So both the Endocrine Society guidelines and the World Health Organization laboratory manual, they're very clear on this point. Semen analysis is crucial for assessing and also treating male infertility.
So for someone who's taking enclomiphene, regular semen analysis is like key to track their progress.
Exactly. It's the best way to monitor how the treatment is affecting their sperm count, their motility, morphology, all of those factors that are going to determine their fertility.
Yeah.
And the research shows that even small improvements in those areas can drastically reduce the amount of time it takes to conceive.
That's wild. It really highlights just how important this kind of treatment could be.
Okay.
Okay, so we've talked about the science, we've talked about the potential benefits, the side effects, the whole fertility thing, which is huge. But what about like real people, real experiences? Like, does this live up to the hype?
Yeah, we were looking at some patient testimonials from the FDA docket, and there are some really powerful stories in there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One man described years of, just struggling with low energy brain fog, just feeling completely drained all the time. And he said after he started enclomiphene, it was like someone flipped a switch. He had more energy, his mood was way better, and he just finally felt like himself again.
Flipped a switch. That's incredible. I mean, that sounds like a complete transformation.
Yeah, and we saw that same sentiment echoed in other testimonials too. Men talking about feeling more motivated, more focused, even more confident in their relationships. It really highlights just how deeply hormones affect our lives.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. I mean, for our listener who is just tuning in, what would you say are the key takeaways about enclomiphene?
All right, so the bottom line is, enclomiphene is a potential treatment for men who have hypogonadism, but it works a little differently than, say, traditional testosterone therapy. So instead of just replacing testosterone, it actually encourages your body to make more of its own.
Which, if I remember correctly, is kind of the goal, right?
Yeah.
Our bodies are usually a little bit better at self-regulating than we give them credit for.
Exactly. And that approach, that stimulating your body's natural production, it seems to come with some big advantages, especially when it comes to fertility. We talked about how TRT can actually hurt sperm production, but in clomiphene, it actually seems to, maintain or even improve it.
Yeah, and like we said, I mean, that's a game changer for a lot of men.
For sure.
And we can't forget about those potential positive effects on cholesterol levels, which is like a great bonus, especially when you think about, heart health is so important as we get older. But it's important to remember that, no medication is totally without risk.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And with enclomiphene, just like any hormone therapy, it's really, really important to be aware of the potential side effects. We talked about that risk of blood clots, but the data does suggest that that risk may be lower with enclomiphene than with other testosterone therapies.
Lower risk doesn't mean no risk, of course,
Of
but
course not, no.
yeah, so it really all comes down to having those open and honest conversations with your doctor, weighing those potential benefits and risks, and just, making an informed decision about your health. And I think that's probably a good place to wrap up our deep dive for today. Enclomiphene, it's a fascinating treatment option, definitely has the potential to really change the game for a lot of guys. But as always, knowledge is power. So keep learning, keep asking questions, and just take control of your health. You know me, always thinking ahead. What about enclomiphene? But like bigger picture. Anything else about it we should be thinking about, maybe beyond just these immediate benefits?
Oh, that's a really interesting way to look at it. It makes you think about men's health in a whole new light. What if instead of just, treating the symptoms of hypogonadism, what if we could actually get to the root cause of it all?
Okay, now we're talking. I love a little philosophical twist.
Yeah.
What'd that look like, practically speaking?
Well, we tend to think of hypergonadism as just a natural part of aging, right? But what if it's not? What if it's our body's way of waving a red flag saying, hey, something else is going on here? Like maybe it's obesity or metabolic syndrome or even all those environmental toxins we're exposed to these days.
It's true we don't always think about that stuff.
And these are all things that are unfortunately on the rise, and they all impact our hormones in one way or another.
That's a really good point. We tend to compartmentalize everything, but it's all connected, isn't it?
Exactly. So if we could just tackle those underlying issues, whether it's through lifestyle changes or diet or managing stress better, maybe, just maybe, we could prevent or at least delay hypogonadism from happening in the first place. Enclomiphene could be a really useful tool.
Right. One tool in the toolbox.
Exactly. But it's
Yeah.
not a magic bullet, right?
Definitely some food for thought there.
Yeah.
This is why I love these deep dives. It's not just about, learning new facts. It's about sparking new ideas and really challenging what we thought we knew.
I couldn't agree more. And, who knows, maybe this conversation will inspire some groundbreaking research somewhere down the line. That's the power of knowledge. It has a ripple effect.
Absolutely. So, to our listeners out there, if you're dealing with hypogonadism, just know you are not alone. There are options out there. Talk to your doctor, do your research, and most importantly, advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to ask questions and really be in charge of your own health.
Well said. And beyond that, just take care of yourselves. Your overall health plays a huge role in your hormonal health, so don't underestimate those healthy habits.
Perfectly said. We'll leave it there for today. Keep exploring, keep learning, and never be afraid to ask questions. Until next time, happy diving.